Okay, ladies and gentlemen, good evening. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day and evening to spend time with Quenton and I. Again, I'm John Morganelli, former Ivy League Director of Admissions from Cornell University, founder of Ivy League Admissions LLC, and the author of the book Growing Ivy: How to Crack the Code on Elite College Admissions. Today, Quenton and I will be giving a shortened version of a presentation I've already given before. And the reason we're doing a shortened version of that is because we want to do a second part of this that we've never done before, and that's go over some student cases live. I've never really chanced students live before, but I thought it'd be interesting for Quenton and I to kind of just have a conversation about what we see and hopefully provide some insight for everyone in the audience about how to think about their own story, how to think about the elements of the story, and how to put those pieces together when it's time. So before we jump into college admissions, for those of you who have not attended other presentations of mine, I want to briefly introduce myself and my background. Apologies there. As many of you are already aware, I've served as an admissions officer at 3 different institutions. I've personally reviewed over 30,000 applications for admission over the course of my decade in college admissions. I was part of the review committee that reviewed the University of Pennsylvania's brand new evaluation process, which was called committee-based evaluation. I was invited down to UPenn to review that process and give feedback. And while I was the director of admissions at Cornell, I was appointed at 32 years old. I've managed the process for over 20,000 apps a year. I supervised a staff comprised of 80% PhD who served as faculty and academic advisors. I hired and trained over 40 application readers per year while I was at Cornell. For those of you who are not aware, there's full-time staff that read applications, but there are also part-time readers that often review applications. Those readers are brought in because of the quantity. And I would train those readers every year, over 40 a year at Cornell. And then finally, I was really fortunate during my tenure at Cornell that I was able to be part of the Ivy Plus conference. For those of you who aren't aware, the Ivy League schools, plus MIT, Duke, and Stanford, they get together every 2 years on a college campus, and they have an enrollment summit where they share information about how they make decisions, how they build a class, what qualities they're looking for. And I was fortunate that it was hosted at Cornell so that I had my staff there, so we could really kind of spend some time and energy learning about the other institutions. So real strong background in college admissions, not just at Cornell, of course, and Lehigh, where I worked, but also really all of the Ivy League, plus the plus schools of MIT, Duke, and Stanford.
I guess I'll introduce myself too really quickly. So yeah, I'm Quenton. I'm an associate counselor that works underneath John. Like John said before, he trained a lot of 40 plus application readers per year. He's also trained me. So I'm also a trained application reader under John's supervision. We work very closely. We meet pretty much every week discussing clients, brainstorming ways to develop narratives for the clients that we see. Yeah, I'm really excited to be here presenting with all of you.
Great, thanks, Quenton. And since time is limited here, we definitely will not be going nearly into the depth that is necessary to answer some of these questions. So if you do have questions about the statements that we're making, jot them down, and we will try our best to answer those during the Q&A. Okay. After my presentations, I do try to collect feedback to get a sense of what worked and what didn't work. And one of the things that seems to come back time and time again is that not everyone's familiar with the definitions, with the terms that we're using. So I wanted to just discuss a few of the terms today that we'll be using. These are important just so that we're all on the same page about what it is we're actually talking about. The first term I want to note is academic direction. This is fundamental to our strategy. Everything is built around the academic direction. So it's important that you understand, number one, that when we're referring to academic direction at the beginning of this process, we're talking broadly. That might be at the college level. Are we talking about an engineering app? Is this a business app? Is this an arts and sciences app? Broadly, what is your academic direction? And then underneath that, a little more narrow, the next term I would use is majors. And there's kind of 2 different types of majors that we're referring to. We're referring to prospective majors, and we're referring to your actual major. Your prospective major and your actual major could be the same, but they may not be the same. And it's important to differentiate them. Prospective major is what you're putting down on the application, right? It's listed on the Common App or the Coalition app. It is not your actual major because you don't declare your actual major until generally your second semester of your sophomore year of college. Your prospective major is simply what you're telling the reader you plan to do. And it's important because if you tell the reader I plan to major in computer science, they're going to evaluate you that way. If you say I plan to major in agriculture, they're going to evaluate you that way. And that means they're going to evaluate you within the context of the competition. So your prospective major matters because it impacts the likelihood of you getting in based on the competition, but it also doesn't matter as much as you would think, right? Because you're not choosing your actual major, the thing you're going to graduate with, right? So it's important to differentiate prospective major versus actual major. The third term I want to note is holistic review. Holistic review is the review process that is used in the United States at highly selective colleges, right? This means that the quantitative data points like your GPA, your SAT, your rigor, right? That's part of the evaluation, but the holistic aspect is the fact that they're going to take that into consideration plus the qualitative aspects. How do you spend your time and your energy? Who are you when you're in a community? What do you contribute to that community through conversation or otherwise, right? So holistic review means, yes, we want to know what your stats are, your grades, your standardized tests, but they want to get to know the whole of the person. It is important to recognize that we are not saying that holistic review does not mean well-rounded. I think a lot of students hear the word holistic and think it means well-rounded. We will talk about well-rounded and whether that's a good thing or a bad thing later on, but holistic review means they're going to review the whole student, the whole applicant, right? How they spend their time and their energy. It doesn't mean that they have to be a well-rounded student. So we'll talk about the differentiation later. And then the essays, right? There's different types of essays in the application. The one that you're probably most familiar with is the personal statement or the college essay, right? That's the one that gets sent to every school you apply to. It's a personal statement in that it could be academic, but many times it's not. Sometimes it's a very personal statement that has nothing to do with academia. And then there's the supplemental essay questions, right? These are your institutional specific questions, school specific, right? Cornell has their own questions. Harvard has their questions. Columbia has their questions. Each university is going to have their own supplemental essay questions. And some universities will have different supplemental essay questions depending on the college that you choose at the university. So at Cornell, for example, every college has a different supplemental essay question. Arts and sciences is different than engineering. Engineering is different than industrial labor relations, etc. Personal statement, supplemental essay questions, two different types of essays. They're both important for different reasons, and there's different approaches to each of them. We'll talk about those at a later point. And then application story or application narrative. I wanted to note that phrase because I use it a lot. I really believe that if you want to differentiate yourself in this process, there's only a few ways to do it, right? You could be the best, right? You could have the best grades, have the highest standardized test. Not everyone would win every competition, right? But not everybody can be the best. In fact, there's probably only one person who can be the best, right? The valedictorian of the class is the best in that academic conversation. If you're not going to be the best, how do you differentiate yourself? There's a variety of ways, right? You could differentiate yourself by unique academic interests. I'm interested in an area of academia that other people aren't overly interested in. Or you could have a unique insight on something that is pretty common. In the end, there needs to be a story to differentiate yourself. If you don't have a story, very likely the readers are going to go in some level of order, right? Based on your GPA, based on standardized test, based on rigor, based on the area of academia that you chose and the relative competition. If you want to buck that order in any way, you need to give them a story. And it needs to be an academic story. It needs to illustrate that you're interested in something, you're curious, that you've explored something, and that you're ready to contribute to the conversation. And then the last two terms are overrepresented major and underrepresented major. This is important because in this conversation, we're really talking about prospective majors, right? At the time I'm applying, am I identifying on my app an overrepresented prospective major like computer science or biology? Or am I identifying an underrepresented prospective major like Greek literature or the classics? Or am I identifying something in the middle, right? It's not overrepresented, it's not underrepresented, it's just a typical number of applicants to that specific major. This matters a lot because the competitiveness of getting in is based upon how popular the major is. Super popular majors like pre-med, which is the track, and computer science are super competitive. And majors that are not overly popular are not very competitive. We'll talk a little bit about how that impacts our strategy a little later. But remember, we're not talking about actual majors, right? We're not suggesting, well, maybe you wanted to be a doctor, but it's easier to get in as a Greek literature student, so you're going to study Greek literature. No, right? We're suggesting that there are different ways you can build your app to get in and then possibly declare a major that you want later. Very rarely do we use Greek literature because most students don't want to spend their time in high school exploring Greek literature. But for example, that is a great example of an underrepresented academic major.
Yeah, so next, this data was taken directly from the Harvard lawsuit, and I just wanted to take a moment to examine it in a bit more depth and what it means when you really break it down. So if you only use grades and test scores, which includes AP scores, Asian students would represent 43% of the incoming class at Harvard, which is represented by Model 1 under the academic only column. But when we throw in extracurricular and personal aspects, that percentage of the class drops to 26%, which is represented by Model 3 under the extracurricular and personal column. That means that 17% of the spaces at Harvard are lost because the applicant failed to demonstrate desirable personal qualities through thoughtfully conceived extracurricular activities. This has nothing to do with the fact that the applicant is Asian. As you may notice, I'm not even mentioning Model 4, which takes into demographics of being Asian into account. I'm only focused on the 17%, which is the difference between the 43% noted in model column 1 and the 26% noted in model column 3. So this 17% represents students who should have been admitted had they demonstrated desirable personal qualities through thoughtfully conceived extracurricular activities. The point here is that the extracurricular activities matters a lot. And I can confirm that I witnessed with just this last pool of students I worked with, the ones with more targeted, engaged extracurricular activities that contribute to their narratives were the ones that were admitted in ED1. Asian students often build their application like a resume, and it includes engagement experience and qualities that are not really valued at top-tier universities. So it's really your job to choose the right qualities, the right engagement, and the right tone for your overall academic story. And we're going to explore how we exactly do that next. So before we jump into learning more about how to build an application that reads like an academic story rather than a resume, it's important to start to understand what type of story we're trying to tell. In order to determine that, we need to look at the questions being asked among the top 50 US universities. And this slide provides a few examples, but if you were to dive deeper, you'd find that over 80% of the top tier colleges are all asking the same thing. What do you want to study? Why do you want to study it? How have you explored it? And what might you contribute to this space at this particular college or university? And these questions illustrate that our story is clearly an academic story. Remember that the application is not a resume, it's a story. Because if all they wanted was a list of achievements, the application would be pretty simple. But the holistic review process is quantitative and qualitative analysis. So it requires a story, not just a list of experiences. Most students, even quite smart ones, will provide a rather disjointed list of experiences and achievements that really fail to effectively communicate the area of interest and engagement that and their potential contribution to the university. So effective academic stories are built through illustrating how a variety of different engagements support that identified area of academic interest. And these engagement experiences and the connections between them are the evidence that the student is interested and has explored and is ready to contribute.
Okay. Before you can build your academic story, you need to know the area of academia that you plan to identify. The first step is in identifying which type of college the student is seeking. In the beginning, there are 3 typical options. The first one you can see at the top of the screen is business, right? Business school is your typical business areas: accounting, finance, management, marketing. You'll note that I skipped over the term economics, even though that's on the slide. And the reason for that is that economics is a good example of a major that exists in multiple colleges. It will exist in the business college, but it will also very often exist in the arts and sciences college. And we'll talk about what that means when we have those situations a little later on. Then we have the engineering college, right? The engineering college speaks for itself, all the disciplines of engineering, and then arts and sciences is the catch-all college of everything else. You'll see at the bottom of the screen in green box, there's a box that says specialty colleges. Some universities have specialty colleges. Cornell is a great example. They have a variety of specialty colleges like the College of Agriculture and Life Sciences, the College of Industrial Labor Relations, College of Human Ecology. Those are specialty colleges, and they can provide a unique entry point. But at the very beginning of our conversation, rarely do we start talking about specialty colleges. We usually start with these 3 undergraduate directions and then build from there. If you hope to apply as a prospective engineering or business student, it's advised that you start that process pretty early. And the reason for that is that these are very specific colleges. I'm sure many of you are aware already. Students who get involved in engineering, they join robotics teams, they get obsessed and they spend a lot of time and energy in school, out of school, engaged in that type of work. And what happens is it sets a bar of entry. Same things happens with business students who get involved in business competitions. That doesn't always happen with arts and sciences students because of the wide variety of options and pathways in arts and sciences. So we'd like to start our conversation with business and engineering to ask ourselves, are these colleges in consideration? If the answer is yes, we need to take a progressive step to explore. If the answer is no, then we end up with our catch-all college of arts and sciences. Because many of our students do end up in the arts and sciences category, many of my conversational points are built around that, but many of our students this past year started to branch off a little bit. The first year I had mostly arts and sciences. This past year I had a bunch of engineering and business students as well. Arts and sciences provides the most flexibility for unique pathways, but there are some competitive advantages to applying engineering and business depending on the type of student. Before we discuss how to consider the right prospective majors, it is important to note the distinction between a college and a university, okay? At a university, there are often multiple colleges, right? So at Cornell, for example, there are 7 different colleges, 7 undergraduate colleges. And I tell you that because as we move forward, you're going to see that most of the strategy is built around at the first stage, how to identify the type of college the student plans to apply to. And the reason that is because there is strategy and there are consequences behind choosing one college over another. For example, in most instances, it is much harder to earn an offer of admission from the College of Arts and Sciences at Cornell than it is to earn that same offer from the College of Industrial Labor Relations at Cornell, right? They're not similar in level of competitiveness, and yet you graduate with the same degree, a degree from Cornell University. Same type of situation whereby if you apply to NYU, it is significantly harder to get into NYU Stern than it is to get into NYU Arts and Sciences, and at the end, you still have the degree from the same institution. Each college at the same university will have different degrees of competitiveness, and it is very important that you're aware of those different degrees of competitiveness before you decide exactly what major you plan to note on your application for admission. Okay.
Also, another thing to mention is like within the college, like of arts and sciences, you can change your major. And there's a lot more flexibility in switching majors within the college than, transferring colleges entirely. So if you're transferring from maybe arts and sciences to business, it's a lot more difficult than maybe just applying business directly as an undergraduate applicant.
Yeah, great point, Quenton. We call that at the university, that is what we refer to as an internal transfer, right? They're transferring internally from one college to another college at the university. If you visit universities and ask them, how easy is it to transfer internally? Most of them will make it sound like it's pretty easy, but the truth is it depends on the university. Try transferring from arts and sciences at NYU to Stern. Right. It's impossible. Same thing with Wharton, almost impossible.
But if you were to transfer from the business school to the arts and sciences school, in some contexts, it's actually easier.
Absolutely true. Yes, very true. It's a good point there. So the point that Quenton was making and I was trying to make throughout this is that transferring colleges at a university is not guaranteed and might be difficult. Transferring majors in a college, right? So I go to Cornell, I go to the College of Arts and Sciences. Now I want to change my major. I want to go from art to physics. You can do that immediately because they exist in the same college. I want to go from physics to engineering. That's not so easy because physics is in arts and sciences, engineering is in the engineering college. And so now you have to internal transfer to a brand new college. That is what is not guaranteed. And that is a very important part of our strategy as it relates to building an application for admission. Okay, if this is not clear at all, later on, please do ask us questions. This is really an important part. And I'd say it's probably the part students make the biggest mistakes on. When I look at student application after, and I look at what they did, I think Quenton and I most of the time look at it and think to ourselves, either they applied to the wrong college, that's a huge problem, but very, very likely they applied to the wrong prospective major based on the things they've done and the competitiveness of that specific prospective major.
So let's assume for a moment that we have successfully identified an area of academic direction that we want to begin building evidence towards. It starts with illustrating your interest by taking an initial action to explore. And the most accessible exploratory experiences are the high school clubs and organizations. Even if you are not interested in the club offerings or don't think that they're interesting, there's still some expectation that you'll engage in your school community to help make those clubs better or to start new ones that may not yet exist. From the foundation of in-school extracurricular engagements, the student can add to that foundation by joining things like summer programs, community shadowing, out-of-school organizations, and then from there, we're going to try to create depth through more targeted engagements. And I consider the best targeted engagements to either be academic research that ends with an abstract that can be used as the focal point of the application, or depending on the area of interest that the research is in, it can also have a piece that's an issue-based community engagement that ends with an advocacy article that builds on or supports the rest of the application story. And this initial action and the corresponding depth creation what creates the academic story. And it leads the reader to see the desirable qualities of curiosity, self-motivation, independence, creativity, problem solving, and persistence of the student. More importantly, students learn how to investigate the world around them, and they begin to understand how a fleeting question like, why does my school receive less funding than another nearby high school, can turn into a true investigatory experience that leads to a deeper understanding and provides opportunity for young people to learn how to contribute and how to solve multidisciplinary problems. And then, oh, sorry.
Sorry. Go back to that slide. I just don't want to pass that because there's a parent asking what's a level 2 publisher instead of asking question later. Can you maybe, John, explaining? Can you move page?
The previous slide.
Back one page. Right. Please.
Yeah, give me 1 second.
Sorry. Right. John, under research, you and Quenton, level 2 published. There's people asking what that means.
Yeah, level 2 published means that, basically, publishing is a big word, right? In college admissions, did you get that research paper published? That's a question that's asked a lot. There's a lot of different places you can publish something. The most standard place a high school student is going to publish would be what we refer to as a non-rigorous high school level journal, right? That'd be like level 1. Level 2 would be a rigorous high school journal, meaning that it's high school students submitting, but there's a rigorous review process, 3 submissions or whatever it might be. And then level 3 would be an undergraduate student journal. So, if you've done a really strong research paper, you might be able to submit it to, say, Stanford's undergraduate journal. And then the next level after that, 4, would be a professional level journal. So the point here was that this student got it to a rigorous high school level publication.
How much would you say that would enhance the value compared to a level 1?
Minimally, I think that's a great question. I think in the end, the admissions officers, if you got to level 3 undergrad or professional, level 4, we did have a student this year, level 4. He had gone through 3 levels of review, three rounds of review, got rejected 3 times, and then did get it into a professional level journal. We went out of our way to share that with the admissions committee, because if you just put that journal out there, either the reader won't recognize it, that's 90% likely, or they won't believe it. So you got to really go out of your way to provide context. Most of the time, what level publishing doesn't matter that much. But good question. Thanks for bringing that up there, Quenton. Okay, so get to the next spot here.
Okay, so going back to what John mentioned earlier about the difference between a well-rounded and a focused student, I want to highlight some key differences between the two. So we're going to do this a little bit later in the presentation as well, but this is, I guess, a mini case study that we have. And here's 2 examples of some real student profiles. Both students' SAT scores were exactly the same at 1480, and both had the same number of AP courses, which was 7. And they applied to Johns Hopkins for 1 year apart, but both applied as public health majors, but were originally positioned as pre-med students. So the first student who was accepted aimed for an environmental public health focus, which can be seen through the engagements they participated in, such as Science Olympiad, serving as the VP of the Environmental Awareness Club, performing environmental health research in a local county health bureau, and then also researching about water quality in a Superfund site. So do you see any connections that flow through these examples? So yeah, I would say that they have this theme or connection to environmental public health, everything is connected to this narrative that the student has been engaged in these activities and has contributed or developed their interest in environmental public health, which is a very niche and focused subject area. You can almost like track how the student got interested in the subject matter. So they went from like this club and then they developed an interest in the environment here. And then they searched more specific engagements that tied to public health and the environment later on. And then we're going to also take a look at the other student who was actually waitlisted. And they also applied as a public health major, but they are positioned more as well-rounded, as you can see from the engagements, which are a bit more all over the place. The student participated in the Science Olympiad. They did some local hospital shadowing, which is more pre-med focused rather than public health, which is also the case for the biology focused wet lab research. Then there's also some volunteer experience with Habitat for Humanity, but that doesn't really connect too well to the public health narrative. There may be some creative way to spin that to fit a public health narrative, but given the context, there's not a lot of other public health engagements that can really help bolster that story. And then the rest of engagements like peer tutoring, captain of the tennis and fencing team, and piano are much more general activities. There's nothing wrong with these activities. It's just that they don't contribute much to the story of why the student is interested in public health. Everything is more all over the place. So I don't know if hopefully this helps illustrate the difference that focused engagements illustrates depth of interest and exploration. Even if the well-rounded student has better grades, the focused student has a better chance of developing a compelling application narrative.
Okay, so this is a pretty quick presentation here, and we want to save time for really kind of organic conversation between Quenton and I about real students. But I want to take one moment before we jump into that, just to talk about my partnership with IvyCompass. You know, I really love working with students, but I really enjoy providing strategic oversight, right? Like sitting down and thinking through all the different strategic options and then giving the student the tools necessary to be successful. The thing that IvyCompass provides me in spades that I just cannot provide myself is, number one, engagement with parents, right? To make sure that just because I think, you know, it's a good idea and the student seems to understand it in that moment, sometimes the parents don't understand it, or sometimes their students don't communicate it with their parents. So the IvyCompass team makes sure that parents are involved and understand the process that we're going through. Of course, language support for families that English is a second language is super helpful to make sure that parents understand where we are in the process. And then really the robust academic support services that IvyCompass has because of its relationships in the community, whether that's through SAT prep, mentorship, academic mentorship for research, or competition prep. There's really a robust academic resource offering that provides a lot of different pathways and strategic options for Quenton and I to think through how do we position this student. So that's my partnership with IvyCompass. I've had people reach out to me and say, oh, you know, can I come to you directly? Sure, you could come to me directly. You'd be missing out on a lot, right? If this is a really strong relationship where all of us together create a really a structure and a framework for a student to be successful. I have a position of, I want to challenge students, right? I want to get them to be as strong as they possibly can be. And the IvyCompass team also supports students. When you challenge them and support them, you find that they're super successful. And that's what this relationship and partnership is all about. Okay.
Then next we have the, here we have the cases.
First
More
time.
exciting. Hopefully, the first time. This is the first time we're doing this in a presentation. So a little exciting.
I know, that's exciting. Yeah, me too. Very exciting. That's all real student, by the way. We reach out to some potential interested family and then offer that opportunity. Today, this time only 4. There's maybe more than, but we don't want to accept too many. That way they have opportunity to listening to you more a little bit. Thank you. Yeah.
Great. So before we jump into this, Quenton, if I move, let me just see what you can see. If I move, can you see this student workbook page here on my screen?
No. Oh,
Okay.
now I do, but
You could right here.
Yeah, right now I can.
So I might move this over from time to time just so that we can kind of work through. I thought we'd start with a framework. So let's kind of have a conversation. So this student, first and foremost, intended majors, robotics and computer science. How about I start this first one? You do the second one. Does that sound good, Quenton? To kind of like at least kind of lead us through the conversation.
Yeah, sure.
All right. So the first one we have here, we got a student here interested in MIT, Carnegie Mellon, Brown, intended majors, robotics, computer science. So first question, I think you and I would be asking here, just
Which college? Yeah.
which college? You could certainly argue, look, that it probably is an engineering student just based on what we're looking at here, but you could do CS in engineering and in arts and sciences. For those of you who are not aware, I mentioned that about economics, right? Business exists in the business college. Economics also exists in the arts and sciences college. Same thing with computer science. Computer science often exists in the engineering college and in the arts and sciences college. And sometimes they have different degrees of competitiveness. So that's a conversation question we would ask.
And then I did see a question earlier about like how to find out if it's possible to transfer to a CS major. And the answer is pretty much, if you're in the arts and sciences school, if you're already in that college, you can immediately transfer and declare your major as a computer science major.
You can. Now, I will say MIT, I believe, and Carnegie Mellon, they have the technical schools. There's not many schools that have done this, but some of the technical schools have kind of broken it out and said, here's the STEM part of arts and science, and here's the arts side. So It is important. I would check at MIT and CMU specifically. Those would not be great examples of a strategy where you could, build a public policy story and then declare computer science. Whereas at Cornell, you definitely could do that. So you have to check, but that's
those are very rare, differences that only like very few schools will have.
Right. It just happens to be the two that
right. Yeah.
And then GPA, I know, Quenton, you and I get this question all the time about GPA, like what GPA do I need? And as you know, like there is no GPA, right? Like this is it depends on the school. And so the first thing I'd be saying is 3.9, I need to see the high school profile. For those of you who aren't aware what the high school profile is, the profile, every single high school in the country that sends students to US colleges, and by the way, every single high school outside of the country as well, that sends students to US colleges has a profile, and that profile can be quite helpful. You can often get a sense of what the student's GPA is within the context of the class. They might not have rank, but they give you a good idea. So Quenton, if you just want to continue on, I'm just going to pull up a profile. Maybe somebody can just.
I'll just say, because there's also a lot of questions about like the GPA and like with weighted, unweighted, and rigor. I will say that because someone also asked a question like, what's better, an A in a lower rigorous class compared to an A- in a higher rigorous class? So first and foremost is that if you're applying to the elite colleges, you have to be showing that you're taking the most difficult classes that are being offered at your high school. That's like a bottom line. You have to be taking the most rigorous courses. So I would say rigor is like more important in this scenario. Like an A- in a rigorous course, like an AP course, is much different than having like an A in a regular like gen ed course. So I would say that's very important. And that ties back into like the weighted, unweighted. So I think, the technically I would say like the GPA that incorporates the fact that you're like taking honors and AP. So that's the weighted one. That would technically, I think, have more value, but it's within the context of the high school profile, which John's pulled up right now. So
yeah, kind of hard to see. I just pulled up Jericho High School, just a school that we're familiar with, but this is online. You can just Google Jericho High School profile.
And you can Google your own high school profile as well. You all have access to that. So
yeah, you should. And most of them have it, not all of them, but most of them have it online.
Right.
And this stuff is interesting. Like right here, take a look right here where it says, look at the number of AP courses, right? So someone says to me, hey, is it okay if I take 8 AP courses? Well, it depends on the competition. At Jericho High School, it's not a great idea to only take 8 because that means that we got 36 plus 20, 56, 60, we have 70, 80, almost 85 students in front of you with more AP courses than you. That's a big obstacle to overcome. So the profile provides you context. Okay, out of there. Let's continue on in this conversation here. So 3.9, I think we would do a pretty in-depth analysis to make sure that we understood exactly where the student was in the class.
Class rank helps with that as well. If you can get that information as well, because that's important to know, like what students are ahead of them and who's like what percentage are they.
Yes, exactly. And some schools are still ranked. Not many do. Some do. That's awesome. If they don't rank, it's they still have a general there's systems out there, Naviance, all these different types of systems that can give you an idea of where you stand, and that's really important. Okay, so then courses, it looks like advanced placement classes. We have math, problem solving, honors, algebra 2, and geometry. So it looks like a ninth grader here is taking 2 honors classes. The only question I would be asking about that would be, are there sometimes honors classes are prereqs for AP classes? We want to get as many AP classes as possible. It seems like this is a reasonable ninth grade curriculum here.
Yeah.
All right, so I mean, I'd say at ninth grade, the courses and the curriculum at this stage is not much of a conversation. Nothing really has happened yet as relates to rigor. We go over to the extracurricular side, school clubs. Looks like we got the cross-country team. You know, seems unlikely, but the first question always asked for any athlete, is it possible, and they might not even know in ninth grade, but is it possible that the student might be a recruited athlete when it's all said and done? If the answer is no, then just recognize that athletics is nice, but it's not going to be a needle mover. Right. So we have to just think about how much time we spend on that. Math club, Quenton, you know, what's your take on math club? I see it as nice and flexible, but we haven't written too many essays about math club. So what's your take on how we use that?
It's one of those like science Olympiad where like almost every student will have some participation in like a math club or science Olympiad kind of club. Unless like this, unless like the student is in like a higher leadership role and they have maybe an opportunity to incorporate some sort of new project or, you know, further their club past like the normal circumstances that they were in before, then it's kind of like, you know, it's kind of like everything, like most applicants will also have that kind of experience. So it doesn't set them apart. It's not something that would like set someone apart.
You'd have to be like basically president in math club or have some level of objective achievement. Yeah, exactly.
Otherwise, it looks like they have some honors and competition placements with the robotics club like down at the bottom. So
yeah, so I always just kind of this science Olympiad, as you noted, math club, debate club. Those are all in my mind like nice, strong, foundational academic clubs that we want you to be in, and you need them, but they're rare that we're writing essays about them. You know, so. Good to be in math club, good to be in debate club. They're not specific, they're nice and flexible. So if you decide you want to apply to arts and sciences college, great, math club works. You want to apply to engineering college, great, math club works. You want to apply to a business college, great, math club works, right? So it's nice and flexible. Same thing with debate. But at some point, you want to pick organizational opportunities that are more specific that illustrate your directional interests.
Like the robotics team would be a good example. Exactly. If you're going to be a robotics major, you should have some robotics experience, and they have also the placements, which are important. If you want to talk about that a little bit more as well.
What was the last thing you said there, Quenton?
The plate, like how differentiating by like getting awards and placements within competitions. Right. That's the real value that you get from having competition experience, is actually getting awards and placements. Sure, it's good to have the experience, but it doesn't add too much value unless you're getting those like semifinalists, finalists, top 3 finish kind of placements with those.
Yep. And at this stage, being in ninth grade and already having objective achievement in the space, you know, even if, let's just say for argument's sake, the student's academic interest changed over next, you know, you could argue that it still is a good decision to apply under engineering because you have objective achievement already. It's quite easy to move from engineering to arts and sciences if you want to. So you'd want to use this objective achievement to get in, you know, and if you apply to an arts and sciences college right now, let's just say you decided I want bio, right? That's what I really want. And you put all that robotic stuff down, it's possible it actually makes it harder to get in. It's possible because that's not really engineering oriented, or that's engineering oriented content for an arts and sciences college. So it seems already to me that this student is pretty positioned for an engineering college.
Yeah, and there's like flexibility with the business club, and they also have like, if you want to go back real quick, they have the entrepreneurship leadership summer program. There could be room to add like a multidisciplinary interest with the student, them also being interested in engineering, but also interested in maybe the entrepreneurship side of that, like maybe starting a business that's related to engineering, which is that could be a whole nother academic narrative that we could add, and definitely would set them apart, I think, even further than other students. That depends on the students, you know, ability and how interested they are in that subject, and if they're interested in combining those subjects, because I think multidisciplinary interests add a lot to an application as well.
Definitely. And to your point, you know, if you look at the programmatic opportunities, and I think you and I hear this a lot, Quenton, like students, we say like, hey, what do you want to, you're going to look at Penn today. Tell me what programs you're interested in. They very often come back with the integrated programs, right? The TPE program, the politics, philosophy, economics program, right? The students are drawn to that. But what happens is, especially when we get them late, you know, they'll say, well, I'm really interested in that because I want this, I really love engineering, but I really want to get the business background. And we'll say, but you have no business background now, right? And so since you have none right now, you're not going to be a viable candidate to that program. If you're a ninth grader like this student who already has a little business experience, already has a little engineering, put those pieces together strategically into a story, now you're set for that type of
and it's very, very compelling.
Yes. Yeah. So it's yeah, sorry, go ahead, Sophia.
No, this is great. This is fantastic format. Two of you are really, really engaged and have a lot of knowledge to share. I just want to add that. So the best I wanted to emphasize is coming early. Don't wait until pondering.
Yeah, we've already
11th grade,
encountered that.
senior, then you have no time. Like, you know, what Quenton and John just mentioned. If you wanted to enter something by interdiscipline area, then you have to be coming early. You have to build a story in that direction. So I wanted to emphasize that.
It makes our job a little bit easier when we can help the student direct them in the development rather than taking all of these disparate pieces and trying to fit a story together, because then it's not as and we saw that with the last pool of people that we worked with. We had like some students, it was just like, how do we make this work? And it was much more difficult than if we started with them, you know, 1 or 2 years earlier. We could have had more room for them to develop that narrative more clearly.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Thank you. And there's one question, I think, before you move on to next student, I thought we'll be able to maybe provide an answer since they're here now. Just in this case one, does that 2022 Johns Hopkins University camp add any value to the student profile? I think that's a very good question to answer.
Yeah, good question. You know, I would say that it adds a bit of value because it has the word leadership in it. So that value right there, you know, there's always certain words that are going to add some value. Now, you know, if you just went to that leadership program by yourself, does that make you a leader? No. But if you're president of the robotics club and you went to a leadership program and you're talking about the leadership skill set from that program and how you institute it into your organization, now it can be quite powerful. So I would say it can be powerful, but it has to be used appropriately in order for it to be powerful.
The next question, I know we have a Q&A on the end, but I think this question also very good to emphasize, even we have to repeat twice. Sounds like undecided major will not have a chance to make a story. I love that question. So can you maybe emphasize, and then if Q&A, we can, you know, talk about that again, because we need to drive that message.
There's a good and then there's a bad undecided, which John can get into in more detail.
Yes, you know that, right? You know, sometimes a student will come to us and they're like, I'm undecided. You know, I've done research, data science research. I'm really interested in this economics issue. I've been involved in government in my community. That's the right kind of undecided, right? I've spent so much time and energy in a variety of things. And this is demonstrable deliverables, right? I can show you what I've done, and I haven't figured out yet either which one I like or the synergies, right? How do I put these things together? That's a beautiful undecided app and can be quite compelling. Sometimes we accidentally do undecided, Quenton, when we do public health at a school that doesn't offer public health, right? We've built a public health story, right? And it's solid because the student wants to apply to Cornell, for example, right? We have a public health storyline, but they apply to a school that doesn't offer public health. So we sometimes will either choose a prospective major or a variety of majors, or you can identify yourself as, quote, undecided. And then in the essays, you know, I'm interested in studying sociology, anthropology, economics, biology in order to experience a public health undergraduate educational opportunity. That can work as an undecided student.
That's kind of what we did with the student that got into WashU. Was they didn't have a public health major, but we had them to, you know, position as a public health student. But what we did, it was anthropology and global. It's kind of like health. I don't know exactly what the major was, but it was like tangential, kind of related to public health, but it was anthropology technically.
And you know what? Honestly, if I have to look back and say, I think that if the schools that don't have public health, we might do better because we're right. Because we're taking a story about public health and fitting it into anthropology. What high school kids know how to do that? Not many.
Yeah, true.
So undecided. So let me just briefly answer that question, which is 95% of students apply undecided the wrong way. 5% have the right elements. And if you put it together the right way and illustrate intentionality and strategy about how you spent your time, you just haven't figured out what the end goal is yet, that works. And we've done it very successfully, but most students can't do that.
I think we should just go through all of these the way we've been doing this one, right? I think this is pretty useful, right? To do it this way. Okay, cool.
All right, great. We'll go to the next one then. I would say I will just leave. I do think that like a summer camp at Phillips Andover, like we don't know what that is exactly.
Yeah, we don't have the context.
Yeah, no context. And the name doesn't really matter, right? If you put Phillips Andover is a great school, but no readers are saying, oh, wow, he went to Phillips or she went to Phillips Andover. And if that said Columbia or Harvard, it also doesn't really matter, right? It's really about why did you go to that program? Tell us why intellectually.
What is the program offering? Is it actually related to the story? Because they could go to Phillips Andover for a biology summer camp. What does that have to do with like robotics and engineering?
Exactly. You want to start this one?
Yeah, sure. So this student is also, this is a sophomore. Sorry, the thing's cutting off a little bit. This is a sophomore student.
Yep,
yeah. So their intended major is business and computer science. Their current weighted GPA 4.85. And I'm assuming the class rank I think that's a typo, might be 545, I'm assuming. So their class rank is high. That's like top 5%. And then they already have 2 AP placement scores. So AP Chinese, AP World. As a sophomore, that's pretty strong that they already have 2 tests that they've taken and that they have 4 and 5 on each of them.
So I would just ask a question about that. Like, did they take AP Chinese and AP World in school, or was that studied for outside?
Right, because AP Chinese, you can take AP exams having not even been in an AP class, because your school can even offer like higher level classes. They're not AP classes, but if it helps if you have the opportunity to take the AP test for those classes that you take, even though the school doesn't technically offer you the opportunity to take the AP classes or AP tests at your school. So yeah, it could be like the student knew Chinese and then just wanted to take the AP test, even though they didn't take it freshman year, which is a good point to bring up. And then courses taken, they have honors. They're taking AP Psych right now, AP Computer Science, AP Gov, Pre-Calc. So they're already, at this point in their sophomore year, they have 5 AP exams they'll have.
Which 5 and 10th. Yeah, it's pretty good.
Yeah, so that's pretty strong, I would say. So the academically, so far, it's suggesting a strong student. And then in terms of leadership, they have the student council class president. That's good evidence. Self-improvement co-founder. We don't know exactly what that. We would actually meet with the student, probably get more information about what self-improvement is. Is that a business? Is that a club? Is that an organization outside of the school? The fact that they have a co-founder role with that, I think that's a good evidence for leadership experience. So we just want to ask for a little bit more context with that one. And then Chinese associate secretary, I'm assuming that's like a culture club, probably, which is fine. That's like probably like a science Olympiad math club type of thing, where it's like, a lot of students will have that type of engagement.
I'll push back on you on that just a tiny bit.
Okay.
That I think that culture clubs fall under that same category, except they want to see students exploring their other cultures. Like the idea of promoting your own culture, I understand why a lot of students do it, but it doesn't resonate on the app. It just doesn't. Saying like, I really value my own culture is the opposite of what they want. What they want to hear is, I'm super inclusive. I want to learn from people who are disparate and different experiences. True. So I would suggest, and I'll just throw this out there with Chinese students specifically, it's, there's a feeling on campus that the Chinese students stick together. And this having Chinese culture clubs in high school that are, I'm not saying that they're problematic, but if it's fundamental in your story, it kind of just makes it seem like that's what's going to happen when you get to campus.
If you wouldn't want to highlight this, I would say like in an essay, I don't think it's an experience that's worth committing like a supplemental essay to, or
Right.
let alone the personal statement. So, and then marching band, we'd also ask the student whether music would be an interested potential major. If not, then I don't know if it's like kind of like a sport. If they're not getting recruited, then I don't know if it serves like a whole lot of additional value.
And and you and I went through this a few times this year where,
Mhm.
student comes to us and they say, I'm interested in biology. And we say, wow, you spent a lot of time playing music. And they say, but I don't want to major in that. And I say, well, are you really good? And their
Mhm.
parents say, yes, they are. Right. And in this case happened this past year where, I don't think the student was planning on applying as a music major. We looked at their stuff. Almost all of their time was spent in music. We asked them to go get evaluated by someone from the IvyCompass team that said, wow, this student's actually quite talented as compared to students I've sent to Princeton, Harvard, Yale, Cornell. Student applied as a music major and was admitted. That student applies under any other major. There's no chance he's admitted because he has no evidence in any other space,
Mhm.
So this is
Right.
important for everyone out there. If you yourself or your child is musically gifted, and it doesn't matter if they don't want to be a musician for the rest of their life. That's not the question here. The question is, are you good enough to get in that way? Right? That's the
Mhm.
question.
I will say from the engagements that I see so far, there's nothing that shouts out business or computer science.
Is that, oh yeah, see that's that, and this is in 10th grade, right? Say we're halfway through 10th. Right now, I would say, just based on what I'm seeing right here, I would say the student could not possibly apply to Stanford as a CS major and be admitted because there's no evidence in 9th and halfway through 10th outside of curriculum, which doesn't count.
Mhm.
So I would say, student council and class president, that's great for policy and government and all that type of stuff.
Mhm. It
Physics
could
book-
also be like leadership if they have like an entrepreneurship type of experience, then I guess that would go hand in hand with that, but they don't have that. They don't have like, oh, I started a small business.
What
Also
area would
yeah,
you put
sorry.
this kid under right now?
What'd you say?
If this kid said, okay, what prospective major should I build under right now?
We don't have a whole lot of context because we have like student class president. I feel like secretary, I maybe like poli-sci, but I don't.
I would do public policy just based on
Yeah.
Boy Scouts and student council.
Yeah,
That'd be
because
to build
Boy
it.
Scouts, there's also a lot of community engagement with that.
Right. And we'd be asking what exactly were you doing for Boy Scouts so we can
Yeah.
figure out that could be the bounce off point for a policy oriented.
Yeah, or there's also opportunity for Boy Scouts to work with private local businesses. So
True.
if you're still, there's a way to pivot it. If there's like if we had the student earlier and they hadn't done their Eagle Scout project yet, that could be their Eagle Scout project.
Well, absolutely. And this definitely, like I said, I think it's probably too late to build a CS app. It's definitely not too late to build a business app.
No, definitely not. See, also we can talk a little bit more about our experience with CS this past year.
Yeah. Before we do that, I'm just going to share my screen over here. This is Wharton's programs. Can you see that, Quenton?
Yeah.
Right. So like under business, at Wharton, there's only one degree, right? It's a Bachelor of Science in Economics, but then they have all these concentrations.
Right.
And so your point, Quenton, like, we can turn something like this is business economics and public policy, right? So
Mhm.
student council, we have Boy Scouts, turn it into something that's a little oriented towards economics and business. And we could turn this into a business story. And I think personally, you tell me, Quenton, I felt like you and I crushed the business school apps. They were easier in my mind, like to NYU and to UMass.
I think the difference is that a lot of the other students that are applying to business school in high school, there's really not a whole lot of opportunity for them to have like that narrative story that's like, oh, this student's interested in business, like outside of, oh, they did the investment club, oh, they did the investment competition. But when you have like a student that's interested in business and then they connect it to like public policy, because there's so much interaction between the government and the private sector and how that affects each other. And
Yeah.
So it's very rare for a student to be at that age thinking about the complexities of these systems and how they work. So I think like the way that we structured the stories for those business students, it really set them apart from other students.
And what do they normally, when we get a business student normally, I mean, I don't know, I hear the same thing over and over. They want to work on Wall Street, hedge funds, right? Like,
Right.
And the thing is, like, imagine for a moment, right? For the people in the audience out there, you're writing an essay, you're reading an essay, right? One person, this is for business, right? And one person says, I'm really interested in the public policy of education. And I'm interested in understanding how, decreasing funding to colleges and universities, I want to understand how that impacted, the housing market, right? For young people just starting out because they're more in debt, right? That's a question that like regular people are interested in knowing. Like, yeah, I take out a lot of money for my loans. How does that impact my life moving forward? Versus, I was trying to figure out how to pair two equities against each other and break down, a differentiation so that I could somehow, short one and long the other, right? The reader doesn't want to hear about money. They want to hear about problems being solved, So I love the business school apps because I feel like we have like we know how to do that. And it's obviously stood out very well as compared. I mean, you figure in public policy, everyone's trying to stand out and make an impact on their community. In business, some of them are focused on money and we're focused on solving problems, Cool.
You also have to think about the readers too. They're all like undergraduate, people who graduated from undergraduate school, probably in some sort of arts and sciences related major. So they're more interested in those types of stories than like, oh, I'm going to go to Wall Street,
Definitely. Thanks for saying that too. I will say, having worked in college admissions for a long time, right? Like they don't pay a lot of money in college admissions. Readers are very, very aware of privilege, right? Like, they make $50,000 and the kid's like, well, my family gave me $20,000 to invest and I doubled it to 40. The reader isn't impressed by that. They don't think, wow,
No.
He must be a great investor. They think he's a rich kid, So you got to be aware of tone. All right, let's go to the next one.
Yep.
So let's just go back to the last one for 1 second. I would say ranked 4 out of whatever, something 545, taking nice, strong curriculum and rigor and some nice engagement. It's just that it doesn't fit the areas of academia that they say they're interested in. So I think this is a nice foundation to be successful. Maybe for business, there's a lot of work to do. For policy, already kind of walking down the pathway. For CS, I'd say it's probably too late.
There's more, yeah. And do you want to talk about the CS thing that we encountered?
Oh, yeah. That's a good point. Well, I'll give my thoughts. You can give yours right after. My thought is basically that, it's like deja vu, right? It's like every year I have the same conversation. I'll come across a 10th grader or an 11th grader, and they've been involved in computer science, right? They are in the coding club. Maybe they're in the machine learning club, right? They're involved. Things have happened, right? This isn't like a 9th grader where we can just tell them right away, don't do that, right? They've already spent time and energy. It's important to recognize if you've spent time and energy already doing computer science, if you put that down on your app, no matter what else you say, you could say, I'm not interested in computer science. It's just something I did. Don't believe, don't worry about it. The second they see computer science, if you are Asian, they are going to think that you're interested in it, period. So if you are computer science, then great, you're computer science and you're in a super competitive space. And we'll talk about that in a second. If you don't want to be computer science because you don't want to be in that competitive space, then you have to be 100% committed to that. You can't put coding club down on your activity list, right? Because they will immediately put you with that group of people. So what happens? 9th grader, not a problem. 10th grader, 11th grader who's interested in computer science comes to us and says, I want to go to, Penn. I want to go to Cornell. And we say, just so you know, computer science is by far the hardest way to get in as a prospective major. And they say, okay, great. Let's shift a little bit. And I say, all right, great. You have to leave the coding club. We're going to delete all that stuff from your, and now I need you to pick something new, a social impact topic. We're going to do public policy, something brand new. And the kid says, no way. I love coding club. I love doing this stuff. I'm not giving all of that up. Can't we just kind of like shift a little bit to data science? And usually I've done data science before and you can be successful. But what happens is those real computer science kids, they don't want to shift all the way to data science where it's just give me a big data set. I'm going to develop some insights and I'm going to, in essence, develop business decisions based on a big data set. That can be data science and that works. But what they want to do is I want to use my technology skills to manipulate the algorithm or collect data in a different way. Or the student that you're talking about, we've talked about, we had two students. One said, most of their time was spent in cybersecurity. And he said to me, and I know he's right, he's very smart, cybersecurity is data science, John, that's not CS. Well, every reader thinks it's computer science. If they hear the word cyber, they think it's computer science. So in the end, the point here is that computer science is highly competitive. And if you don't want to be in that space, you have to commit 100%. Most students won't do it. And then they end up in this situation where they look like a computer science student. They're trying to talk about something else, and that doesn't work. So the student that we were talking about, the one that's in my head at least, he's very impressive. He had done 3 internships, one of which was at the NIH. During that internship at the NIH, he found something real. And when I say real, meaning like he submitted to a professional journal, they said no 3 times to him. He worked with his mentor to get it fixed, submitted again, got it published. He had, and the essay was, although incredibly technical, I edited it myself multiple times. It was about as well done as you could make it while still maintaining the technical nature of the story, right? Which was important because he had found something impressive. He gets rejected outright, right, from Cornell. And I was surprised because even though I know how hard it is, I've seen a lot of CS students and I thought, this is one of the good ones. This is a really compelling story. And what happened? I called, just to get a sense, like, I've worked at Cornell and I wanted to get a sense of what are they looking at? What is it that was wrong with this student? In my mind, there was nothing wrong with the student. I knew what was wrong. He was Asian, he was male, and he had put down computer science. And the truth is what they said was all they really knew about him was that he was a computer science student and that his essays were about artificial intelligence and machine learning. And that categorically ended the conversation because
they probably put him in a pile. They probably put him in a pile. He's put him in the pile with the other Asian males, computer science majors,
Game over.
Yeah.
And that was sad, I think, because it was a good story and we put a lot of effort into it and he deserved it, but it illustrates the point. You can't fight the current. And the current is this is a highly, highly, highly competitive space. They have way too many applicants and they're going to have to make very difficult decisions amongst very similar students. It's not a good spot to try and get in. Okay.
Should we move on?
Yeah, let's go to the next one.
We should also try to maybe do the next ones a little bit quicker so we can.
I know I talked about
it. Yeah, no, it's okay. I think what we're doing is very valuable. At least I think the conversation is valuable.
Very nice. Yeah, we love the format. This is great.
Okay, so the next student, University of Michigan, Cornell, California Institute of Technology, Engineering, Computer Science, Applied Physics. So the graduation year, this is also another sophomore, current GPA 3.9 or 4. Okay, and then class rank 10 to 20 out of 50. What do you think about that?
That's a problem, That means imagine for a moment there's only 20 kids, there's 20, say he's 20 or she's 20, That means that if you apply to Cornell or let's on this list, say University of Michigan, because everyone applies there, right? That means probably 15 of the 20 students in front of you are also applying to that same school. And that's a lot of people to overcome.
This also could be an extremely selective high school or something. We also don't have the class, they do have a 3.9 out of 4, and yet they're I don't understand how that's even possible. But it could also 50 students. Of the kids. Yeah, 50 students is a small class. So I'm assuming it's some sort of elite private school, maybe.
That's what I would think. I think you're right.
Yeah.
But GPA, as you know, means nothing. I mean, there's a public high school down the street from me that everyone has above a 4.0. 55% of the class is above 4.0,
Yeah. So then, we student like you said earlier, student profile is important to have as well with that. And then courses taken, they have
TOEFL real quick. That is super important here, that if English is a second language for you, and especially if you're an international student, they're expecting to see the TOEFL score. Unless you have a really strong critical reading score on the SAT, you need a TOEFL. I would highly suggest, no matter what, if you're questioning it, you submit a TOEFL. And I would tell you that 100 is the minimum to get into a reasonably selective school. Like Lehigh, which had a 30% acceptance rate, TOEFL 100. Below that, you're not even in the conversation, really. And at Cornell, it's really closer to 110.
Yeah.
Sorry, I cut you off there.
No problem. And then the AP, they have 3 APs in their that's like pretty much on track on their sophomore year. Unless those the AP classes that they took their freshman year. We still don't understand the context. So that could be they took that first semester and they're still taking it now, or they took it freshman year. But if they took those freshman year, I would say like that's more than, I think, above average, I would say.
BC Calc too, like that through 10.
Yeah, right. Yeah, BC Calc taken this early, that suggests very strong progress in math, because like BC Calc, that's like a lot of students will take their senior year. So
and I just want to say, like, to the people who want to go into STEM spaces, apply to an engineering college or CS, this is your competition, right? Like kids are taking Calc BC in 10th grade. And parents will say to me, like, oh, come on, like, my kids got to Calc BC in 12th grade. That's awesome. That's standard. That's what you need to even be considered.
Right, especially at those elite universities. That is like pretty much the bottom of what you need. And then so collaborate with other schools, club, and publish some electronic music. We have a music experience. We have a comp sci related experience. It looks like I'm assuming RPG is like related to the video game space, unless it's tabletop RPG. I'm assuming it's like video game related. So that's some design. Website with their friends, can sell NFT product. Interesting. Started a tutorial about coding. 10,000. Okay, I like this engagement. Started a tutorial about coding and got about 10,000 people reading, and helped some of them start code. That's an impressive engagement, I would say. If you also have the number too, like 10,000 people reading that, I would say that's
impressive.
Yeah.
And then the question that I would have is why? Like, why did 10,000 people read it? There must be something. There was something missing in the market, or something, or an approach or a perspective to that coding tutorial. That's what we want to know. But 10,000, as you noted, would make us interested, right? Like, we want to know about it.
I would say like this is
it is like,
oh, sorry,
did
go ahead.
that this year, the NFT thing. I had a kid who did the NFT thing, and I just don't think it landed. I don't know.
It's also, I think there's a lot of flack, like in the like other people that are not in like investing, they see it as kind of a joke, honestly.
I think it's fake.
Yeah, even because cryptocurrency has a little bit of a negative connotation. I think NFT is like tenfold the negative connotation. Yeah. So I don't know if that would be super useful. Designing a website might help. I don't know if the context for an NFT would help, honestly.
I like to collaborate with another school. I think that's something we talk about a lot. It's like, if you're can you connect with your community? Can you connect with other schools? Showing the ability to kind of reach out is powerful.
Is there a sound issue? Can people hear us?
Yes.
Okay. Oh, someone just commented no sound.
No, I can hear you.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, like we said earlier, the whole spiel about computer science majors, I would say they have a pretty decent basis. We also I think there's a big difference in gender. We don't know if this is a male or female student. I think
it's male student.
Okay.
Yeah. Be better.
It would be, unfortunately, that's just the way it is, though.
The thing, there does seem to me, when I look at this, it feels like a little bit of a disconnect. It's like we're taking BC Calc in 10th grade. We have awards already, and then, we could be ranked as high as 40% of the class.
That's why I'm wondering, like, I'm wondering about like the school. I wish we had the school profiles as well.
Yeah, agreed.
The schools in China. It's coming from, I think, Beijing International School.
Well, that's a well-known school. So, they're going to, the thing about those big time schools that they're well-known, they're generally going to go a little bit. That's a pretty good school, if I remember correctly. Am I correct, Sophia, if I remember correctly? Or am I wrong about that? Now I'm getting confused with the name of the school.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I did not give you the school name. I think it's just the student is located in.
They're
Oh,
in
no,
an
no, 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 no. Oh, hold on one second. Sorry, my mistake. The student is not in Beijing. The student is in US, in Princeton area. It was established, focused on math and science.
Okay. That's that. There's a
yeah,
whole
it's not
other
big
context
school.
too with international versus domestic students. Applying internationally is much more difficult.
It is a lot more difficult.
Yeah, but the
especially
student
international
is
student
here.
applying comp sci.
Right.
Yeah,
So
okay.
remember, this student is here near Princeton. That school is very small, very small private school.
Here's what I would say about this. Is really interesting. You know, when I was at Lehigh, we almost always took all of our international Chinese students, almost all of them were taken domestically from tiny little high schools like this, where basically the student had a US experience, was kind of, kind of understood the US educational system. And if we had questions, like as an admissions reader for Lehigh, I could pick up the phone and call the high school because it was a US high school. I got to Cornell, I had my international director, I was in charge, but she had done this for 20 years. And I said to her, I looked at the list and there was not one admit from international students from domestic high schools, Chinese high schools. And I went to her and I asked her about that. And she told me, well, I think that the individual, she thought that the best high school students were staying in China and that the students who were domestically living were, not all of them, of course, but if we're categorically talking about them, were 1 degree below what you could get from the students in China. So it is important to recognize from school to school, some of them have different approaches, universities, to whether they take the students from international students from the actual country or whether they take international students living domestically. And I would say like at Cornell, this would not be a great app for Cornell because of the way they read. Whereas at Lehigh, let's assume Lehigh was as selective as Cornell, because of the way they read, that would be a more reasonable app. So that's something that is part of our conversation when international students are looking at universities.
How do you think the student looks with their chances at University of Michigan?
So, saying they're an international student.
They're not international, apparently.
Not international.
Yeah. I think they need more engagements. It's also the comp sci thing is just, we've just been really floored by some of the, because we had super strong students with top of their class. They have very relevant engagements within computer science, and then they end up just not even getting in.
Yeah, I think what I would do here is I think, for example, the student could apply physics, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is that a good decision? I think no. And I think the reason for that is because I think I would rather take a standardized student, right, who's going to typical engagement experiences and compete in the engineering space, where basically we win on execution, right? It's like you and me sit down and we think about the process and the way we describe it and communicate the insights in a way different way than an engineer would, right? And because of that, we often win on the execution as compared to on arts and sciences, where there's a lot more variability amongst the students. They're going to have, more unique perspectives. And the problem with arts and sciences, if you apply physics, is that they can just say, like, if I'm the enrollment manager, it's kind of like, it's just another STEM kid, basically, right? Like I can categorically be like, oh, another STEM Asian male student. In engineering, they're all that, right? So it's
Right,
not like I can categorically just get rid of them that way.
Mm-hmm.
So I would rather have this student apply engineering than arts and sciences applied physics or CS in arts and sciences.
Yeah. Because there's more opportunity for us to work with them with engagements that actually set them apart from the engineering application pool.
Yeah. And, I think it's like when we write those engineering essays, it's not like we're talking about like take this piece and that piece and put it together, right?
Mm-hmm.
We talk about how we solve problems. Who did you talk to? What questions did you ask to identify the problem? The depth of our analysis, I think, we did really well with the engineering students this past year. So I think I'd be confident with a student who's in Calc BC in 10th grade, assuming that he goes to a relatively good school, that class rank isn't too much of a problem. I think to an engineering school, the student's in a relatively good spot because we have objective achievement, super strong math, sequence. And although I don't love his extracurriculars already, at least he's doing some stuff, and we still have a little bit of time. And
there's room. And I like this tutorial about coding with the 10,000. I think that's a standout experience right there.
It could be. That could be something that you could build around, definitely. All right, next one.
Yep. Okay, another computer science.
My Lord.
UC Berkeley.
If this isn't obvious, we have 4 cases, right? Like, this is how readers are. They're like CS, 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 right? And like everybody has an opinion already. Like, we don't need any more CS students. So imagine you got agriculture here. You know, I haven't heard about that in a while. Now you're interested in what they got. So, all right, Quenton, run me through this.
Okay, so this is another sophomore. Current GPA not calculated yet. A for all subjects. Okay, so I'm assuming that's probably like a 4. Unweighted. And then math, they have, looks like the school doesn't offer AP tests or AP classes. So this might be a discussion to have with them, is like, what classes would there be an opportunity, or what level of academic experience do you have that you would be willing to take an AP test in this subject, just to get those test scores for the admissions to look at. Because they do sometimes want to see those, like, several, the student has multiple 5s or 4s, at least 4s, but 5s are really what can sell the student.
I just want to stop there for 1 second, because I hear this all the time. Like, people will say to me, my counselor said AP exams don't matter anymore, or
true.
You know, or like their high school doesn't have AP, and they'll say, like, you don't have to take AP exams. Here's what I would tell you. Your school sets not your school, the kids from your high school who graduated before you have set a precedent. So I don't really care what the counselor says, you know, that's irrelevant. What matters is, what did the people before you do? If students from your high school have been taking AP exams outside, you know, then you must do it to compete. And if you don't believe me, Google inside the admissions selection committee, something like that. And you will see, I think it was Swarthmore or ever bad word, but it was inside the selection committee. It was like 7 years old. I would say it was pretty accurate. The first thing the dean says is, oh, wow, look, the student got a 5 in the AP exam and didn't even take the class. First thing they said. And I've heard that 5 million times in selection committees. So I actually think it's better if your school doesn't have any AP classes. Then you get to take all these exams with no risk. You get a bunch of 5s, you look great, you know? It sets
you apart. But if someone else at your school is taking AP, like, say someone else in your year is taking like 6 or 7 AP tests, and they have it on their application, and then you don't have that, then you are at a disadvantage.
Definitely.
And then extracurricular, we just have, oh, sorry, go ahead.
I'll just throw in, you know, IB, the thing about IB is the reason it's not talked about as much is because it's fine and there's no issues with it. And I think most counselors would actually say that IB might actually be better curriculum preparation, but you can't like sit for the IB exam, right? Like the way you can with AP exams. And so, and there's way less variability. Like you're going to take 3 higher level IBs, right? So it's not like, oh, one took 12 and one took 2. So in AP, there's a lot of variability, which allows for the reader to make decisions based on it. IB, in my mind, is just like, okay, it's the IB curriculum. That's good. Now we move on to the rest of the app.
Yeah, and also a quick question. Someone asked if they can take AP tests outside of your current high school. Yes, you can. You can just sign up for them without having to take them at your school.
Yep.
In terms of extracurricular, there's not a whole lot to go off of, it looks like. We don't have the context of what the NGO is. We don't know what that is. And does that contribute to a computer science narrative, even if we had the context?
Depends what the NGO is, I guess. Maybe.
Right.
I don't know.
Yeah, we need to know the context of that. I would say like we need more details. They do have 2 top 1% finish awards in some competitions. But the hobbies, I don't think any of those would be like, oh, the student does drum skiing, there's no clear computer science engagement yet.
Right. I mean, you have a skill set that's obvious. Oops, and that's great. But you don't with the math background, but we don't see much engagement. So the student obviously needs engagement. I don't think I would try, even with this, I still wouldn't want to do CS. Like, it's not a good idea. So
yeah.
You know, maybe we do, you know, building off that math background, maybe we do something I don't know, president of the NGO, maybe we do like economics, or something
Yeah.
like that.
NGO, yeah, that could also be like, yeah, economics. It could be some kind of public, it could be like some kind of public related.
Well, it could be public policy or government,
Yeah.
definitely. I was just trying to build off the math background, if that's a thing.
Right.
The thing about the NGO, obviously the what it is matters a lot. But it almost like it's like these terms, like it's an NGO or this is a nonprofit. Like those terms don't mean anything. Like nobody cares about you working for a nonprofit or an NGO or whether you make profit, right? Like, I have a client right now whose father is, quite rich, and the kids, all they want to talk about is the fact that they started a nonprofit that donates money. And they just don't understand what I'm trying to tell them, which is, if you donate a lot of money, they think you're just a rich kid. If you donate a little bit of money, they think you didn't do anything. So you can't win with donating money as a young person. You
Yeah.
have to intellectualize it.
Yeah. So we really need to know the context for that one. But yeah, I think the computer science is something that we might want to pivot away from, and there's still time. Could be data analytics. Like you said, could be public policy related.
We have
It's a
hundreds
little
of
bit
hours
difficult.
of your work here. I mean, I'd be trying to put those together. Tell me what the 100
Right.
hours of your work is. Tell me what the NGO is. Put, the non-governmental organization, if it's somehow connected to the volunteerism.
There's a
Then-
data analytics opportunity there with the NGO.
Yeah,
Definitely.
Yeah, definitely.